Okay, so my name is Robin Emdon, and here we are in Cockington village. This is the manor house behind us. And when you think about Cockington, let me tell you what's unique about it. It's really its location. It sits nestled between two major towns of Torquay and Paynton, and that's probably the main reason why this village, as opposed to all the hundreds of other villages in Devon and Cornwall, is extremely well known. Because throughout the Victorian era and the 20th century, Cockington was one of the #1 destinations for tourism in the southwest, as I say, because of its location. But what I like about Cockington is that I like to think of it as a gateway to the rich tapestry of the history of the whole of the British Isles, because we can go back in Cockington in history all the way back to the Saxon times. We can go back to when Ulrich, the Saxon lord, had not just Cockington but many other estates. And here in Cockington we have the Normans. When they conquered Cockington, they built the church, which is behind me in the trees, and they started to build a manor house. Now, we don't know exactly where the manor house was originally, but it was probably on the site of this one. And so let's, in terms of the tapestry of the history of Cockington, let's pick a couple of periods for you. So I like the 12th century, when William de Falais sold Cockington on to the Robert Fitzmartin. Now, Robert Fitzmartin, who bought Cockington in 1113, had several estates, as they all did. That was the way that the Normans divided up the land, all over the county, including Dartington, just down the road, the other side of Totnes, and he also had St Dogmaels in Wales. And he decided he's going to build an abbey in St Dogmaels, and curiously, having built that abbey, he said to them, I've got a church in Cockington, would you like that? So he gave them Cockington Church, which and when he gave them Cockington Church, that was fine until the Premonstratensian, I'm sorry, completely fluffed that. I can never get that word. What is it? Premonstratensian.
Of course.
So when the Premonstratensian canons came to Torquay in 1196, or at Tor Abbey, in fact, they built their abbey on the seafront, and naturally by 1203 we have a record of them not buying Cockington Church, but renting it for the princely sum of 5 shillings a year. And we know about this because in 1469 there was a delegation of monks from St Dogmaels came down to Tor Abbey for the matter of a certain matter of £63, 6pence and 8pence. Sorry, £63, 8 shillings and 6pence, an unpaid rent. And we know that we think that a deal was done, and Cockington Church finally became the property of Tor Abbey, when they cleared that. That was an enormous amount of money, of course. So it was it must have been worth their while. But here at Cockington Court itself, let's jump to another part of history. Let's talk about Sir Henry Carey. Now, Sir Henry had been knighted after an early battle of the English Civil War, when King Charles I gave him a knighthood as his reward, and he was also the Sheriff of Devon. And for his good work, he was put in charge of protecting Dartmouth Castle. But unfortunately for him, parliamentarian Sir Robert Fairfax laid siege to the castle, but both of them being gentlemen, a gentleman's deal was done, and Sir Henry was persuaded to peacefully leave the castle, and he was told that if he did that, and he would escape with his life, and he would be allowed to carry on after paying a small fine. Well, the small fine, it turns out Parliament fined him £1,985, again another fortune, and that resulted in him having to sell Cockington to pay off his debts. Now, he still had other land. The Careys, of course, are famous. They own for owning Clovelly in North Devon, and they have a long association with that. And they went on to buy and live in Tor Abbey on Torquay seafront for a long time. But in 1654, Cockington Court became the property of the Mallock family, and the Mallocks were a wealthy family from Exeter. They had taverns in Exeter and Taunton, and they were also heavily involved in exporting textiles, which they would store in warehouses at their taverns, and they'd made their money that way. And they were here from 1654 all the way up to 1930. So let's pick another piece of history about the Mallocks. Let me see, what would be a good one? Well, I suppose the last significant Mallock would be Major Charles Herbert Mallock, who was born in 1873 here at Cockington Court, and he died in action. He was mustard gas bombed in November the 1st, 1917, and he died a few days later on November the 5th. And with him, I think the proper tenure of Cockington really ended, because then they had to find death duties, and when they had to pay death duties, the family were struggling for income, and eventually by 1930 Cockington Court had to be sold because they were asset rich, cash poor, and now they needed, when they sold everything else, they had the cash they needed to carry on. But Cockington then, from then on, had a 20th century typical history of a lot of these places. But if you look at the court itself, you will see that it's really a family home. It's not a great stately home. This was a very modest family. This was a family that just liked, they were farmers. It was an agricultural community going back, as I say, to Saxon times, and they were just a farming family. Richard Mallock would go out 2 or 3 times a week hunting, not for sport, but to bring meat home. Where the farm labourers would farm the land, he would provide the meat for the family and some of the and the house servants. And they would, it was a class system, but they were a very humble family. Reverend Roger Mallock in the early 1800s, for example, he took the 3rd floor off that building. The Cockington Court, is probably Stuart in its origin. It's probably medieval. It had a medieval hall, and after his ancestor, Rawlin Mallock in the 1870s had extensively modified it. Reverend Roger did it again in the 1800s, and what we see now there is a Victorian style manor house. As I say, not particularly impressive. It's very pretty, but if you look around it, there's an awful lot of history around it. You can still see Tudor windows on the side of it that were blocked up for the window tax. And so you've got this, I hope that gives you some idea about the rich kaleidoscope of history that you will find here in Cockington.
Thank you very much.